I'm Dr. Edwards Adesheya Ladimeri. I'm the Director, Center for Human Rights and Gender Education in my university, that is Tai Solarin University of Education in Nigeria. I'm really pleased to be here this evening, and I want to congratulate the organizers of this annual lecture. Now, as a lecturer in a university of education where we train students, my own question is related to education. And the question is in two parts. Now, the first part is this. What are the roles of universities and tertiary institutions in promoting and enduring and sustainable humanitarian actions in societies? That is the first question. Then the second question, I want to direct this to you personally as the speaker. Now, do you think students should be exposed to humanitarian studies in universities? Now, why I'm asking this question is that I want to believe that if students are actually well grounded in humanitarian studies and they have proper orientation, I think that will actually give us a solution to the topic of the lecture we have today, and that will actually make and that will actually give us a truly global approach. Because if students are well groomed, what that simply means is that by the time they leave the universities and start work, they will have been well grounded in humanitarian service, and that will really propel them to act more in the society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John at the front. Hannah. Okay. I'll come to that.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, it's John Mitchell from ALNAP. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank you very much for the lecture. I found it really interesting, and I enjoyed it very much. You know, it's really interesting for us to hear such a sort of lucid explanation of the contradictions and the ambiguities and to some extent the hypocrisies within our own international system. And I think many of us in the room will recognize much of what you said. And I just want to come back to what you said right at the beginning of your talk, which was really about where you feel Russia can position itself within this system. And you said something like, you know, are we in or are we out? And, you know, you did allude to it at one point where you said that you felt that you perceived yourself to be in the good-bad category. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about where you position yourself in the system you've so eloquently explained to us all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. At the back.
Hi, I'm Sean Lowry from the START Network. It's a consortium of NGOs, civil society organizations. I too loved your talk. It was really challenging and really entertaining, and I loved the fact that you quoted Western-funded academic research to identify the failings of the Western system. I loved it. So thank you very much. I guess my question is politicization inevitable? You know, would Russia support the creation of a structurally guaranteed impartial mechanism through which no state could exert its political influence?
Thank you. Shall we start with these three? I can't see any other hand immediately up, but Sasha, do you mind starting? So there was a question about, you know, where Russia positions itself in this good-bad.
Okay.
And the question about, you know, the inevitable politicization, then the question on education.
Right. Well, starting, I don't know, from what? From Russia, maybe. Yes, we're an emerging donor. We are not part of the traditional system in a way, although we started joining the mechanisms that were established and are considered to be as traditional system machinery. Like we, as I said, we channel our assistance basically through multilateral channels, although not through the NGOs at this point. And this is where we are different and why we are bad. Not totally good, but UN, for instance, and other international intergovernmental structures that are working in the field, We are not belonging, we do not belong to the South, to the global South in a sense. We are former G8 member. We are aspiring OECD member. So we cannot be guided by the terminology which is in existence in the South. So we are somewhere in between, and this is exactly the same situation that is happening with us with regard to ODA and long-term development assistance. So we can be a bridge. We can be a bridge between one and the other. But the point is that why do we need it? I mean, this is what I have to explain to my superiors at the capital. And again, like any other new donor, we are struggling through the institutional lack of mechanisms, people, whatever, time. I'm not dealing 100% of my time, doing 100% of my time humanitarian affairs. I have lots of other things to do. So to assume this role, that will be a huge sort of workload that we are not up to carry at this point. But I think if there is an appetite in both communities to join hands and talk, and again, if there are platforms, venues where we can do that, and for me that's UN, we can play a proactive role. Basically, this is happening even without Russia's participation. In the UN, we have India cooperating with Sweden on omnibus resolution. We have strategic humanitarian partnership dialogue or something that is chaired by Brazil and Sweden. So donors from the south, like Russia, and from the north can join hands. I mean, I think we can do that and become more good than bad in your eyes. Yeah, but we'll see what will come out from the summit, how the system will look like, and how the contextual environment or geopolitical environment will be suitable for us to play a proactive role on this. On education, of course, yes, indeed. I mean, if we want to make a system universal, in a sense that I think in the universal always, I mean, the more knowledge people have, in particular in the universities of the South countries, developing countries, if people know more about how the system works, how it's being burdened by the context and legacy, and it's not why it is not principled 100%, and why system is struggling to be principled, going through obstacles and hurdles. If people in the South, through this knowledge given through the curricula of the universities, understand it more, the problem of perception will be less actual, less burning. So people will understand, the recipient will understand how the donors and the organizations implementing on the ground, what are they driven with and by, yes, indeed, students should be exposed to this kind of knowledge. I'm not a specialist on curricular setting, and I don't know how it works in university. I've graduated like 20 years back. But we feel lack of knowledge in our curricula as well in Russia, both on ODA part of business, on development agenda as well, and on humanitarian agenda. We don't have enough curricula in our colleges and universities dealing with that. Now, the answer to Sean, how to struggle politicization, I don't know. I don't know, really. Because, I mean, again, when I was saying all this thing and all these quotations given from the research, I was not blaming as a persecutor of the system. I mean, it's sometimes felt as a force majeure situation when you can overcome it. You need to accommodate yourself to it. What can structurally guarantee the impartiality? I really don't know how it can work. It's going to be sort of Humanitarian Security Council, but I don't know what else can be invented with enough power to ensure that, presuming that there is a desire to delete politicization from the agenda. But because, I mean, it is there because sometimes the governments are wanting it, and this is how it works. And it's a matter of foreign policy, and we need to acknowledge that both ODA and humanitarian assistance has become a matter of foreign policy of the states. And it's, although in contradiction to the principles, this is the environment that we're living in. But I really at loss. I mean, we can think collectively what can be invented, and maybe OCHA reps will help, because they will have to write the outcome documents for the summit. So and they will give the direction.
Thank you, Sasha. At the back, I can't see who it is.
I'm Sorsha from the British Red Cross. You've touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on what you see the purposes of Russia getting more involved in humanitarian donorship, and what are some of the objectives underpinning it. And also you spoke at length at how the system is broken and creaking at the seams, and I'm wondering if you see any role in the new and emerging donors trying to fix this system, or offering alternative models to the system that might have better outcomes for those who need humanitarian assistance.
Thanks, Sorsha. Miwa.
Thank you very much. I'm Mira Hirano from the University of Nottingham. You talked about a very provocative point you said. Humanitarian principles may not be principles as such. It may be watermark. I think it was a really interesting point. My question is whether Russia has its own principles or watermark in relation to humanitarianism. If so, how is it different? And I'm asking this because the West can say, you know, the four humanitarian principles is our principle, and it kind of is forming the Western humanitarian identity. Do you have any sort of identity, or does your identity remain to be non-West?
Thank you. There's somebody at the back, but again, can't see you.
It's Vicky from MSF. Is it working? Yes. I think you touched upon it in your answer to Sean, but I was fascinated by the idea that Western donors were presenting themselves as abiding by humanitarian principles. So I just wondered if you could sort of expand upon that issue and discussions that happen between donors that sort of don't involve the rest of the humanitarian community, as it were, about about that issue basically, and who does and who doesn't, and how you measure that.
Excellent. And any other hand? Not for the time being. So 3 very clear, pointed questions, and excellent to continue to hone in on this debate.
Well, thank you very much. I'm an easy prey for you with the shaking ankles and knees. Why Russia is? Why do you need this? Well, we position ourselves as a normal member of international community with all the attributes and burdens related to that. We may be presented as something terrible and awful coming from Taiga, but we're not. So that's quite natural for us to abide by the common wisdom elaborated by the world, and I'm also mixing the answer with the second question. Russia doesn't have its own principles. I mean, we are happy to follow the established principles reflected in the UNGA resolution 461882. Again, we were criticized for not subscribing to the Good Humanitarian Donorship Initiative, which also has its principles. But if you go through the list, the thing is that, and it's wrong perception created for those who don't know the details of the initiative's principles. We say, how come the principles belong to the UN? They are reflected in the UN resolution. They do not belong to Good Humanitarian Donorship Initiative, and it's not a clearinghouse for us, and we are not there to be considered a good donor only through this initiative. We are following UN and its principles, no matter who invented them. We don't have anything else, and frankly speaking, going through these 23 points reflected in Good Humanitarian Donorship Initiative, some of them are listed as principles, some of them as best operating practices or something like that. I'm fine with most of them. And I'm not subscribed to these principles just because they were sort of pre-cooked and I was not in the kitchen then. I like to see how the food is being cooked. But I mean, going through these 23 points, sometimes I feel that my assistance, however ineffective or inefficient it is, or however young and however young it is, and it follows all this 23, even operational practice, best operation practices. I mean, we are trying, again, to the extent possible within the sovereign approach to whatever we do foreign, to integrate into the system, to follow the system, and and to struggle together with the system through the hurdles and obstacles that is common to everyone, common to traditional ones, and common to the newcomers. I don't know to the extent to which the newcomers are there to fix the system, and do they have an appetite for that at all? I said that not all of them really want to integrate. I mean, they're fine by themselves, and they don't feel this pressure. And it's just because I mean, I can sustain any pressure as a country, and I really don't feel this pressure. I feel a moral pressure from my head, from my policy-making machinery, from my public, to be a good donor, and I'm trying to become a good donor. And but to assume responsibility to fix the system, it should be a joint endeavor, and that's why I was advocating for a dialogue of all donors, and it can be done only jointly. But I don't have clues how to do that. Really, I don't have clues how to do that. Now, and the MSF question was. I was going to elaborate on the
Western donors presenting themselves as neutral. I mean, obviously not everyone in the humanitarian community is privy to donor conversations, and you talked about.
Well, I'm not privy to donor conversations either. I don't know what is happening, but my point is that, and I think that it's starting point for traditional donor governments that, guys, we follow the principles, and they don't even reflect on whether they follow them or not. Or they do reflect, but I don't know. These are internal discussions that I'm not allowed to be intimate to. Again, I'm not here to blame the system. These are the problems that are common to everyone, and I have much sympathy to traditional donors who want to overcome this politicization, militarization, subsumption to these agendas. So basically, maybe that's it, and you can follow up on my answers if you don't get a clear understanding on it. And another disclaimer: I'm not a native speaker, so forget my clumsies in language.
I think your answers are very clear. I think you're stimulating some interesting debate. I'll take one last round, if you indulge me, or maybe even two if there is time. Is there a colleague at the back? I have a very long, elaborate question from the online audience that I'd like to summarize before I... yes, please.
Hi, Steve Zick from the Humanitarian Policy Group. I was just wondering, as a way of background, if you could provide us a little bit of information about what Russia's major geographical and thematic priorities are when it comes to humanitarian action. And also, I'm curious about how is Russia's involvement in humanitarian action perceived by the public, and what role do the public's priorities and concerns play in guiding Russian humanitarian policy, as they do in Britain and all of our countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, at the back there, please.
Randolph Kent from King's College London. First of all, if I may, thank you very much for a very, very interesting and insightful address. My question is essentially this. You laid a lot of emphasis on the United Nations system. I wondered what kind of things would you try and do to improve the operational capacity of the United Nations system as something that you believe should be guiding humanitarian affairs? Thank you.
And there's a colleague over there and then Enrique, but I don't know who's. Ed, please.
Thank you very much. Ed Hedger from ODI. I work most predominantly on the development assistance side, and I think your speech was fascinating. Thank you. I was quite struck by the points you were making about a sense of almost sort of normative pressure to conform with the rules of a club. My take on that club, the traditional donors, particularly the development assistance side, is there's quite a lot of neurosis at the moment about the competitive threat from those who aren't in the club, who are becoming a much more dominant part of the architecture, a much more dominant part of the players. What I'd be quite interested to hear a little bit of reflection on is the niche you carved out, in a sense, the bad good club. To what extent is that Russia in this case, which is subscribing to a set of principles, which, as you say, you follow and adhere to quite strongly, but forging your own way in terms of how you apply those? Or are there sets of conversations that go on among those groups that are not in the kitchen pre-cooking, as you describe it, but are still trying to do the right thing by their own terms, who are having a different set of conversations, which are really grappling with issues of effectiveness and efficiency? And is there some alternative sort of paradigm arising there? Are there any points and consistent points on what effective external action, in this case in the humanitarian space, but also more widely in the development space, looks like? And any insights you might share from those sorts of conversations? If you were the kitchen that you are in, what are some of the recipes coming out? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Enrique.
Yeah, thank you very much. Enrique Taldman from the European Commission, ECHO. Actually, very much the same line as Ed just took. I mean, all the 23 principles of good humanitarian donorship might be debatable, but of course they were invented for a reason, and that is to make the whole aid assistance system, which is under a lot of pressure, both in terms of politicization, complexity, and budget constrictions, to make it more effective for the purpose of giving the most to the beneficiaries who need it. And indeed, we were wondering a little bit along the same lines, what's your experience on how these new donors, and as you see yourself very much as a new non-traditional one, actually can contribute to making it more effective? Because we probably all agree that it's not sufficiently effective so far, but so what's the trick then? If it's not the GHG principles, then what is it?
Thank you. And actually, the online question was along similar lines. I'll read one of the two from Ben Ramalingam, who is an associate of ODI and IDS. Ben says, much of history tells us that top-down, politicized systems seldom change at the behest of those in control of such systems. So does this evidence not challenge your notion that the UN is the answer to ailments of the sector? Is it really able to bring about the kinds of creative destruction so necessary for change in the sector? But again, there's a series of questions all related to, you know, the role that you see new donors play and the kind of conversations you are privy to, and really share it with, you know, with us what you think, whether an emerging model is there, or, you know, new ideas, or what can be different from what we have, really.
Right. Well, I try to be still adequate. Now, the easiest thing was the question on thematic and geographical priorities, and the perception by the public. Well, I mean, we are known, and not rightfully, as provider of the assistance to close proximity countries, former Soviet Union republics, in particular in the Central Asia, which is not true. The geography is diverse, much more diverse, and it's these countries are involved, of course, included, and Tajikistan, Kyrgyzia, or Armenia, but also Africa. Africa, we have Somali, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Lesotho, Tanzania, Malawi, Sudan, Cameroon, as recipients of our assistance, and we're working through the World Food Program mostly in these countries, Middle East, Palestine, Syria. We have, I'm not sure that this is humanitarian aid, but my people gave me in a note school feeding programs in Tunis, Morocco, Jordan, Libya. North Korea, the Philippines, Serbia, Nicaragua. So the geography is diverse than it's being presumed, and it's getting more diverse, and that's the right direction. Thematic, yes, we not exclusively, but to a large extent, we're working through the World Food Program, and it's again one of the sort of considered deficiencies of new donors giving aid in kind over the money assistance. We are still on the in-kind part of the equation, although it's combined with the money contributions that we're giving to UN organizations, we're giving to SURF, we're giving to OCHA, we're giving to UNHCR. So, but predominantly it's an in-kind at this point. Hopefully the balance will be shifting. Perception by the public, again, this is, I believe, a common feature of all emerging donors, that to a great extent, public is more or less ignorant on what's going on, although it's changing, and it's not the case with the neighboring countries, and with the Ukraine, for instance, we even feel huge public pressure, and this is where we behave and where we found ourselves in a situation of a traditional donor, I suppose, where public pressure drives the decision of the government. But I really didn't want to open Ukraine Pandora box. Now, what else? Bad, good club. There is no club. We are fragmented. We are not united. We don't have common venues because, I mean, we're like kids, young and disordered, and no one in the emerging donor groups feels that we need to sort of bundle together, work together, or build a common position. I don't know if it's right or not, and because the bad group, the bad good group is somehow inclined towards working with the Western-based organizations, and Russia is not the champion of the bad good group. I would put South Korea, Republic of Korea, as the champion. I suppose maybe Turkey follows. But whenever we're approached or approached ourselves, any other players in the new players playground to somehow work together or to oppose the traditional approaches. No, there is no thinking in existence to that point, and we don't have alternative paradigm. I mean, we're too simple. We just get some money from the government and react to the request of other governments, and not much thinking and foregoing thinking is involved into that. We don't have like concepts. It's just not a proactive but reactive approach, and case by case thing, rather fragmented, but working more and more efficient, and with the bureaucratic machinery getting better and better geared and oiled, and but it's not following an alternative paradigm. We're still in the same framework as was set by the West. We just wanna this framework to be our common one, not the Western one, but our common one. Now, recipes. Just let's start talking. Something will come to our mind, and I'm not even at the kitchen. I'm eating fast noodles. That's it at this point. So I can't cook. So I boil water and I put it in. I eat. So that may be my comparison to the sophisticated kitchen work. On good humanitarian donorship initiative, I think that the initiative should be more proactive and in outreach. I don't know what happened after the review. I read the report on the review, and it was January 2013, with a mixed assessment, with the challenges stated and with the opportunities and with the strengths of the initiative and of the principles. I don't know what had happened after that. If anything, what are the developments? I think that we may be favorable and at least not allergic to work with the initiative and somehow contribute to its existence and prominence and give it more strength. And I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of Russia in my private capacity, actually. I think that new donors can contribute at least going through these principles and operational practices line by line together with the community, with the initiative champions, and at least learning what it is. Because, I mean, your first reaction is that, what principles? I don't know any other principles other than 46182. And then you go and start reading this, you understand that it's not that awful and that's just wrong title. It should have been renamed from a principles to something else. So we would be clear on the principles part of it enshrined in the resolution and something else, good practices or whatever. As when it comes to the good humanitarian donorship initiative, and at least positive and constructive engagement, I don't think that it's not achievable. I mean, from the part of the newcomers, it's not achievable. If again, we're not proactive, none of us, with some exception, right? But sort of, if I'm invited to someone's kitchen, I'll switch from noodles to something, mixing something stuff. I lost my other knowledge of the question, in particular the online one. I think I'll need to answer it online.
I think the question was more about, can the UN really be the viable? Yes. I mean, I'm not a practitioner. You are practitioners working on the ground. I'm not one. I've been sitting in the negotiations room with some of you, and this is all I know of the system. I know much less of how it works on the ground. Apparently, as I heard from the question, you is far from being perfect on the ground. So, in that sense, donor community, there should be a healthy competition on the ground. If an NGO or ICRC works better, has more access, has more acceptability, has more acceptance from the population, we need to work through them. Again, we as an emerging donor, it's much more simpler for us to work through the established institutions to whom I can give money and then just ask for a report. And that's the easiest for me because I don't have my own implementing arm yet, working on the ground. And again, working through the NGOs will be a next step for me. With my civil society, again, is less than adequate for this job at this point, although it is growing. So I need to find a foreign counterpart whom I can trust, who will trust me, who will not consider me as a loss to his reputation working with the ugly Russians from Taiga. In terms of improving operational capacities of UN working on the ground, I would invite of thinking of, I don't know if I'm right, but somehow, thinking aloud, off the cuff, somehow ICRC manages to stay in situations where UN withdraws, and UN withdraws too easily. And it's sort of protection of the flag rather than protection by the flag. And this is the change of perception, or working with the Department of Safety and Security with the strict instructions could help UN agencies on the ground to somehow change their on-the-ground presence in complex situations, in insecure situations. Another thing will be to, I don't know exactly, again, how to do that, but this thing in UN being part of peacekeeping operation and absence of humanitarian space and total subjugation of
UN humanitarian arm to the leadership, political or military UN leadership, peacekeeping leadership on the ground should somehow be changed. Again, but I don't know the prescription for that and the answer for that. So maybe that's all I can say. But I need to reflect further on that, and we can follow up on this. And finally, the ultimate wisdom from online. What was that?
It was really about whether the UN can be, but you've answered that.
I did.
Can be the
Oh, even not knowing. Yeah, my capacity is evaporating.
I think you've done extremely well, and we have gone over time, but this was so. Oh, there is more questions. I really need to close. Is it really burning? Okay, I think we need to close because it's 10 to 8, and we were supposed to close at 7:30. But Sasha, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly frank, refreshing, open conversations. I mean, we're carrying on with the advisory group tomorrow. I am sure tonight's discussion will reverberate a lot as we think, towards our engagement, as a humanitarian community next year. The dialogue you really, encouraging us to have, a really open, global, universal dialogue is what is needed for this community, and I'm hoping that this again builds another step towards open global conversation. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Well, just as a word of conclusion, thank you, and not for coming, but for just being there and doing this job, and let me reciprocate this. And I was reading all this analysis with total admiration for the people and the authors, and I will collect more, I see, and that will feed into my thinking. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.